This week on the show, I'm glad to welcome Giuseppe Conti. Giuseppe is a former procurement executive with experience at companies like P&G, Novartis, and Merck. More recently, he became a business school professor, has been teaching at the top 10 business schools across Europe. This year, he ranked number one worldwide among the top 30 global gurus for negotiation, has also published a new book, Negotiation Plus Influence Equals Success. Quick lessons to help you win in corporate life. With all that said, Giuseppe, I want to thank you so much for joining me on the podcast today.
Thank you very much, Philip. My pleasure.
Well, we always start with the same question, just to learn a little bit more about your background in procurement. And that is, did you find procurement or did procurement find you?
Well, I actually found procurement because I started as an engineer and I didn't like it. Being a process engineer on the line was not my thing. It was a short-term, daily kind of activity, very local. I wanted to have something which was more strategic, more commercial, more long-term. And I was working at P&G, great company, great school. I learned a lot. And within the product supply field, there were a number of technical roles like logistic, engineering, manufacturing. And then there was what we called purchasing. And I said, wow, that looks exciting. And then I went and get a job in purchasing. And if I may, maybe let me share a small personal story of how I got the job in purchasing. Because the rule at P&G at the time was that you had to be in manufacturing for 4 or 5 years before you could move somewhere else.
Okay.
And I wanted to move to the European headquarters, and I had just joined the company 1 year ago. So it was not in line with the policy. But one of my friends told me, listen, there are 3 vacancies in the purchasing team in Brussels. And when I was a student, I had done the European Technical Seminar. So I was among the 30 engineers that P&G had chosen for this. And one of the persons that came to visit was the head of procurement. So I tried to call the head of procurement directly as a junior guy telling somebody which was still level before. But at the time, there was always a secretary that was picking up the phone. And of course, if somebody junior that calls somebody 6 level below, is never going to put you through. So what I did, I started calling in the evening at 7 o'clock in the evening.
Secretary.
One day, I managed to get the procurement. I remember we met at the European Technical Seminar. I joined the company. I want to move to purchasing, okay? And that's the way I got the interview and managed to then move to purchasing.
And the rest is history. Like, how long have you been in purchasing and procurement then?
Over 20 years. Over 20 years. And I worked with 4 different companies, and very much enjoyed it. And often I moved in and out of procurement, but still managing, let's say, commercial role. For instance, when I was at Novartis, first I was the global head of packaging. Then I went to move. I did the marketing procurement, but being part of marketing. So I moved to marketing, but was head of marketing services. So basically I was managing, let's say, the agency that we were working with. So or maybe, 1 year I moved into the commercial director on the SAP project, right? We had a spend of 200 million that had to be managed properly. So I moved. So in principle, I was in a project role, but I was doing procurement job. Right?
So kind of lots of generalist type, like jumping from one category to another, to an infrastructure role, to touching kind of every piece of procurement that you could touch.
Yeah. And that was a very rich experience. I enjoyed, working in different categories, direct and indirect, and those kind of things. Yeah.
So what do you spend most of your days doing today then? Fast forward.
Now, of course, I do what I love, it's really a true passion, which is, sharing what I learned around the negotiation and influencing and helping people succeed because of those competency. And this is something that started while I was doing my job, because at P&G, we had a system of internal trainers. So I became an internal trainer on top of my job. Then I moved to Novartis. I had stopped until a friend told me, listen, University of Geneva is looking for somebody to teach negotiation in their master for procurement people. I applied and got the job. And then the year after, I started teaching at IMD in Bocconi. Then 2 years later at INSEAD and London Business School. Then the year after at Oxford. Little by little, my teaching activity kept growing.
Yeah.
And then in 2018, I was teaching at 11 business schools, a number of corporate customers, while continuing to do a corporate job. It was just, impossible.
It sounds pretty impossible. It makes me stressed
Exactly.
thinking of how much
Doing
work
night
there is.
and weekend. Now, I teach mainly to MBA and executive MBA, so it was during the weekend.
Yeah.
But of course, if you work during the week and then you teach during the weekend, that's with 3 kids, it was too much. So I left the corporate world and became a professor.
So you, I mentioned in the intro that you decided to put pen to paper and write a book. And first of all, congratulations on that, because I know that is no small undertaking. Could you talk a little bit about kind of your motivation to do that?
Okay. Well, to be honest, the motivation was little. I'll be very transparent with you. I prefer to talk than to write, also because, of course, English is not my mother tongue.
Yeah.
So, writing well in English, even though I've been working in English all my career, of course, it's not the same.
I struggle with that, and English is my native tongue. So, I think that was the one thing I failed at school. So,
I've been writing articles, those kind of things, but not really writing a book. And then, during COVID, I started to write it. And then, the COVID finished, I started traveling and I packed the book. I never really moved to the other part. When I had to start the boring phase of reviewing things, that's something that didn't motivate and I move on.
Yes.
And then in 2024, in the top 30 global guru for negotiation, I got to the number 3 spot. And I've seen that, number 1, for instance, was Chris Voss.
Yeah.
Was written,
with a very famous book
in the field of negotiation, right? Never split the difference. And I've seen that, for the top spot, everybody really had books. Somebody up to 27 books written. So I said, wait a moment, I have to do one myself. And
there's something competitive in there. But
no, it's just, exactly. You have to be there, somehow, it's a business card that you need to have.
Yeah.
So what I did, I took 5 weeks to Thailand. I went to Phuket and I did a retreat in Thailand to write my book. And just while I was writing my book in Thailand, I got the news that this year I was number 1 in the Global Guru. So, yeah.
So you didn't need, you could have just,
I didn't need a book.
You should have just tossed the book up and enjoyed the beach for the rest of the time in Thailand.
That would have been an option, but okay, I was there for the book. And here we are. I'm happy that it became a bestseller in Germany, in France, and in Italy. It became a top new release in the US. So that's...
well, congratulations. And
Thank
congratulations on sticking with it as well through to the end. When we think about negotiation fundamentals, what are the kind of fundamentals that that everybody in the procurement world, should really be familiar with? Or perhaps there's ones that we should be familiar with, but you don't necessarily put into practice, even though we know kind of the principles.
I think, probably the biggest weakness that I see, I do a lot of corporate customer, now I do less business school and a lot of corporate customer. And what I see that procurement people don't do enough is preparation.
Yeah.
Everybody knows that we should do preparation, but because we are so busy, because we do so many negotiations, etc., that's one of the pieces that we skip the most. So my strategy on this, sorry.
I can say guilty for that one when I think about, the old term of winging it. It's like you kind of get into a negotiation, you start a negotiation, but you kind of know what you want on the outcome, but you haven't necessarily done the prep because you didn't have the time. And so I can certainly talk to a lot of negotiations in my past where I just showed up on the phone and, hoped for the best.
Yeah, exactly. So my trick on that one, I prepared a 1-page preparation template. So, of course, you have the more advanced one, but the one that I teach the most is the 1 page, so that, I show to the people that just by simply putting 20 minutes, they can get a much better outcome.
Yeah. Now, we want to talk in the conversation about negotiating internally. And, that being something that we, as procurement professionals have to do all the time, I think that where we have to sell a lot of change, and that requires a lot of internal negotiation around change that we're wanting to sell. Do you find that, like, how much of a procurement job is negotiating internally versus how much of it is negotiating externally? Because we always think about negotiation as being an external negotiation with a supplier.
Yeah. And now the consistent feedback that I get, especially in large organization, is that the internal piece is more difficult than the external one.
Mhm.
And too often, you know, we don't challenge enough our internal stakeholder. I was just running yesterday a training at one of the top 10 pharmaceutical company, and one of the participants told me, oh, the stakeholder asked me to close the contract within 1 week, but, we sent the supplier a 35 pages contract,
Yeah.
and then, they have to reply, and how do I do? I'm not going to be able to do it properly. I think, the basic problem was that we allowed the internal stakeholder to give us the deadline of 1 week.
Yeah.
And of course, it's impossible in 1 week to send a 35 pages document, get it back, then we review the feedback, and then have it signed in 1 week.
Yeah.
And that's, where we have to get better in terms of managing the expectation of the internal stakeholders when they're not realistic.
So in an ideal world, what would we have done in that situation?
Be more firm with the internal stakeholder and say,
Yeah.
listen, if you want to have the standard contract of our company, 35 pages, they are all turned to our advantage, and most likely the supplier is going to come with 54 changes,
Yeah.
then it's not a process that can
Yeah.
be done in 1 week.
Kind of set the expectations up front, as opposed to accepting, and therefore the expectations of the stakeholder have been set that what they want is what they're going to get.
Yeah. And then either you do a bad job, you have to accept things, or you have to not meet the expectation, and then you are the bad one that didn't meet
Yeah.
the expectation.
Is there a line between negotiation and influencing internally, or are they one and the same?
Now, to make it simple for the people that come to my training, I call negotiation the external, and I call influencing the internal. Now, is a simple classification just to, of course, you're going to influence also your suppliers. So it's not a strict definition, but let's say my negotiation training are mainly focused on the external part. My influencing training are mainly focused on the internal side, recognizing, let's say, that the two things really mix each other.
But I'm sure that you baseline a lot of procurement professionals, as you're starting kind of training programs, to understand where teams are, against certain competencies when it comes to that internal I think negotiation generally, but specifically on the internal negotiation. What kind of competencies, are you looking for that make a strong negotiator?
Now, you see, I think the biggest challenge that we see with the internal negotiation, the kind of competence that procurement people do not have enough, is what I call pull energy as opposed to push energy. So, because of the history, right, the driving cost saving and those kind of things, too many procurement professionals have developed a push energy. So, we are going to go in there hard, persuasion, arguments, stating expectation, I want this no matter what. Guess what? If you're going to go with the same approach with the internal stakeholder, it's not going to work. So it's more like, being able that we develop the pull energy, which is more about asking questions, listening, developing a vision, identifying common values. And this is an area where too often procurement people feel uncomfortable with.
Yeah, it's that mindset shift of looking at a stakeholder as a vehicle for us to meet our objectives versus showing up to serve, not in a way that says yes to everything, but being there, as somebody to help our stakeholder achieve their objectives, with the goal, of course, of then us being able to achieve our objectives based on the results of that, but not going in, with 2 feet, looking at them as this is just a way for me to save. Like, this is a big project. That means that I can achieve, a big chunk of my savings off of this project.
Yeah. No, in fact, Philip, we ended up having, the two extreme, and we are often not in the middle. Either people that approach it, with arguments and try to persuade the internal stakeholder with their arguments and their fact, and they don't get buy-in, or people that approach with too much of a service mentality and they take everything from the stakeholder.
Yeah, they say
Which
yes
is
to
not
everything.
healthy neither, right?
How much, I think we're all brought up in procurement to think that data tells its own story. And so long as we have the data and the facts, we can push those in front of a stakeholder, and that's the job done. In your experience, how much of influencing and negotiating with our internal stakeholders is the facts, and how much is it, kind of the way we tell the story?
Now, it makes me think about the theory of Daniel Kahneman, Nobel winner of the Nobel Prize in Economics in 2002, also writer of a great book, Thinking Fast and Slow. And, in this book, he talks about those two systems, system one and system two. So in our brain, we have an emotional side, something that reacts fast, and we have a more rational side, the system two, which is more effortful kind of thinking. And too often, we believe that everything we do is rational kind of thinking. And so all our influencing approaches focus around, how do I have the data, the facts, and the arguments to make it happen? Now, what the researchers say is 85 to 95% of what we do is just automatic decision, system one. And so, there is a lot of things that people decide emotional and then they rationalize.
Yeah.
So the good influencer should be able to play on the two field.
Yeah.
The system one and the system two. So yes, we should have the facts and the data, etc., but we should also influence the emotional side. How do you do it?
Yeah.
You do it with appearance, looking neat, professional as you meet the people. You do it with building relationship, right? You're not just going in immediately, but you make sure that you come across as the kind of person you want to do it.
You build
Maybe
rapport.
you do it stimulating curiosity, right? Maybe the way you talk, the title that the email you write, etc. Also, choosing the right timing of when the stakeholder is prepared to buy into your ideas. And maybe, last point, making it easy for the stakeholder to buy for your ideas. If you think about marketing example, some very successful company that make it easy for us are Amazon, Uber. If you're looking for a partner, Tinder, right? Swipe left, swipe right, you immediately take the decision of what you want to do. But if instead, we approach our stakeholder and we make it so complicated, too many processes, lots of things to fill, a long document, then, we're going to make it difficult to establish this.
Yeah, you want as little friction as possible.
Exactly. Now, there is some interesting research about how can we make a good first impression when we meet a stakeholder for the first time. And 82% of our success is going to be linked to two competencies. To two elements. Let's say they're going to evaluate two main things. One is warmth and the other is competence. So competence, system two, the rational part. Warmth is the system one. So we should both be credible as a procurement professional that understand the business, the market, the supplier, etc., our products, and also we should be warm, somebody that I would like to work with.
Now, if a procurement leader is listening to this and thinking, you know what, my team is mostly, the kind of second used to dealing with facts and data, and not quite so good on the softer skills of, relationship building. How would you recommend they think about increasing the competency of their team around that kind of system one thinking. I think we all start with a system two. Or the majority of us that have been a career in procurement is like technical skills, technical skills, technical skills. If you know your technical skills, then you're good. And of course, that's not really how the role of procurement has evolved to. But that's often where teams start, is that they have that baseline competency, but struggle to kind of make the jump to when they need that system one thinking.
Yeah. Now, a simple thing immediately without spending any money is if the people do not have that much the soft skills, put them on direct material. Because, in direct material, right, there is more of the fact that procurement people do the job, and there is less, certainly, if you put somebody without the soft skills or indirect, then you're really going for trouble. Then, in terms of developing them, I think, we do have a number of solutions in the field of influencing that can help us in the field of stakeholder management and those kind of things. So I'm sure that people can find our contact details into the things. But, we are not the only one. Of course, there are other reputable companies in the industry that can meet your need. But, there is certainly an opportunity for procurement to become better at that.
What are the hardest skills to train for that procurement needs right now that you find, just in your experience?
You know what? Listening.
Yeah.
And let me say this. Let me tell you this. I did a research right before COVID, so 2019, over 100 procurement people with at least 5 years of experience, and they had to evaluate, 20 core competence of procurement people and identify which one were the strongest. Procurement people put listening as the second strongest. Number one, ability to build trust. Number two, active listening. Then the reverse side, the salespeople. What kind of problems you have with procurement? Number one, they don't know the business enough. Number two, they do not listen.
Yeah.
So, there is this gap between we believing that we are good enough and then realizing that maybe we are not that good. And so if you don't realize that you have a weakness, then it becomes more difficult, right? To get people to try to learn it.
What does, a high level of active listening competency look like? It's like one of those things it's probably hard to say that's it versus that's not it. But I'm interested in kind of your thought of how do we kind of, measure that, if you will.
Let me give you 3 techniques to become better at listening. In particular, reflective listening. So you want to signal to the other party that you're becoming better. I will say even more, very useful in the private life, right? So your partner is going to love it when you're going to start applying this. So, if you're going to listen only for 2 minutes full attention, that's the moment.
This is the high ROI part of the conversation.
Change your life.
Yeah.
So, number one is a technique also that has become popular with the book of Chris Voss, Never Split the Difference, which is repeating the last 1 or 3 words, the last critical words.
Yeah.
So you're dealing with an internal stakeholder. It tells you, if we do this, our sales are going to increase by 26%. 26%. And then, you signal to the person that you're listening, and at the same time, you encourage them to tell you more.
Yeah.
A second technique, a bit more advanced. On one end, on the other end. What do we mean? We get the information and we classify them in 2 categories. Now, what is interesting to know is what you put in the second part is what the people are going to follow up with. So you can shift the discussion towards the topic that you want. I'll give you an example, Philip. I'm dealing with a stakeholder which is very negative about procurement.
Yeah.
And they said, working with procurement is so complicated, is so many processes, so many, compliance, RFP, 3 quotes, I really find hell to work with procurement. I know, of course, that you could help me to choose the right supplier and to maximize my budget. But, so complex to work with you, I would rather do it on my own. And they try to ask for forgiveness. That's the negative message that you got. So how do I apply the technique? Well, okay, James, if I understand correctly, on one end, you find working procurement difficult because of the process, the compliance, the RFP, and requests. And on the other end, we can help you to choose the right supplier and to maximize the value for your budget. Yeah, I never get enough budget, and it will help. And then you shift the discussion towards what you're interested. The third technique, paraphrasing. Paraphrasing is summing up what you got, and then ask a question: do I get it right? So that you check whether you got it. Now, by the way, paraphrasing, the typical mistake of paraphrasing is that we give judgment, we give advice, we bring our own autobiography, we make it long. So, it is an art, learning to sum up without adding anything, without bringing my grain of salt. I'm just repeating in a short version what you said, not bringing my own interpretation, my own advice, my own validation of what you said.
It's interesting because I think about how I respond sometimes in the podcast, and that's the hardest thing is I like to paraphrase, but then I always end up adding some, well, in my experience, X, Y, and Z. So I think that's the hardest thing is not adding, not adding your kind of perspective to that, but just signaling that you've understood what's been said.
Yeah. Of course, in a podcast, Philippe, you have a lot of experience. I think people will benefit from getting the perspective of both of us.
Yeah.
So, of course, there is nothing wrong when we build on each other's. But when you're listening to your partner and she tell you something, then, maybe try different, just try to refrain from giving advice, from giving your perspective, etc. Now, if you read the book, Men Are from Mars, Women Are from Venus, then, you have seen that as male, we do have this tendency to come with solution, while probably what's the partner wants is just, being listened.
100%.
That's it.
I'm going to try and put that into practice, and I'll have to let you know how that goes. I know we're coming close to time. I wanted to ask more generally about training and coaching. Like one of the challenges that I see is that procurement leaders may invest in learning and development, but it takes a lot to jump from like the classroom experience to the practice, the real world practice, which is where you see the benefit, the ROI of that training because you're putting things you learn into practice. How do you think about, helping students of any training, of any teaching, any coaching, kind of go from learning about something to actually going and putting it into practice?
Okay. Well, there are different avenues. One of the things is making sure that the participants have an action plan at the end of the training, and you give them a number of advice on what they should be doing, to make sure that they put the action plan in practice. A second avenue is sometimes they need guidelines or even, being forced to do it by their manager. So, then you put a rule says, above $500,000, you have to prepare in writing your negotiation. The third thing, as a provider of the training, we offer a number of post-workshop services. So, we make sure that we are also helping the people putting the things in practice. It may be additional webinar, it may be monthly video, monthly article, it may be coaching, etc. So plenty of things that can make sure that the learning is not one event, but is a journey.
Well, Giuseppe, I know it's about time to wrap up the conversation, but before we go, I just will make a note that I will put a link to your LinkedIn profile along with a link to your book and also your training practice in the show notes for today's episode. So that for everybody will be at artofprocurement.com/podcast. I just want to thank you. Thank you for joining me and thank you for kind of chatting through some of these really interesting topics because it is fundamental to what we do, but it's also when we think about old school negotiating, it's different from kind of using negotiation to sell, ideas and influence and things like that. So I think it's been really insightful.
Philippe, it was such a smooth discussion. It looked like, we've known each other for 20 years. So, thank you very much for being a fantastic host. I enjoyed our exchange. And I hope that what we said will be useful to our audience. At the end of the day, that's our mission, right? To help you become better.
100%.
And let's see if we did something with this half an hour together.
Right. Well, thank you so much, Giuseppe, and I will talk to you again soon.
Thank you. All the best. Bye-bye.